Welcome to another The Wheel Sails presented by The Wheel Reads. Yeah, so we're not sailing today. Yeah, the boat's on the hard, as we call it. It's out of the water. There she is. Yeah, so I'm just going to kind of give you a tutorial of why we pull the boats out of the water, what we're doing. So from time to time, boats do need maintenance. We usually do this in the off season, but every once in a while when we have a lull in the season like we do now, we take the boat out and do some work on it. So what we're redoing now is the bottom. From time to time, we need to redo the bottom paint. It's anti-fouling, which means over time it slowly flakes away, and this keeps growth and things like algae and barnacles from growing on the bottom of the boat. And I'm kind of give you a tour of the bottom, the part you usually never see. So I'm looking right there at the bulb of the keel. The keel is that fin that sticks down and has that big torpedo at the bottom. The torpedo is made of lead, and it is extremely heavy. I think it weighs just about as much as the F-250 Ford pickup truck. That's the prop shaft. The propeller's off of it right now. I'm checking the zinc right there. We use zincs for electrolysis, so the zinc will rust and the prop won't. Back to the keel. Yeah, the keel's the bulb weighs as much as the F-250 Ford pickup truck. The actual fin, or the part that comes down the keel that holds it on, is a hollow steel, fin that comes straight down. When I first walked up, you saw the rudder there as well. It's a fairly long rudder, we draw a good amount of water, meaning that it's pretty deep underwater. I'm standing up without having to crouch at all underneath the boat. You see the water line right there where the black and the white meet. The water's actually slightly right above or below it, depending on how choppy it is. But that's about 10 feet up in the air. So that means we need 10 feet of water underneath us. Otherwise, we're going to run aground, which happens from time to time. Any boat like this, it's bound to happen every once in a while. So, as I move forward up here, I'm just going to show you see the little scuff marks. Occasionally you rub against the dock, things like that. So that's another thing we're buffing out. We're getting rid of some, just make it look pretty. But the main reason we redo the bottom is make it fast. If the paint falls away, the underneath is a lot more rougher, which is a lot less, creates more friction. It's not as fast of a boat. So we repaint it and sand it down and get it nice and smooth, and then actually buff it to make it that really, really super, super smooth and surface, so the water runs really cleanly over it. So once every about 2 to 3 years, we got to redo the bottom, sometimes more. It all depends on how often we have to dive on it. During the summertime, you have to dive once a week on it. To have a diver scrub the whole bottom, make sure none of the algae is sticking to it. Keep it fast. And of course, every time you scrub the bottom, you're taking off even more layers of paint. So just needs to be redone. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm probably going to walk to the front of the boat and show you some of the through holes. So there are holes in the bottom of the boat. All sailboats have holes. Sometimes there's drainage for sinks and things like that. And I'll point those out in a little bit. So looking at the front of the keel there, the leading edge, we use a fairing compound. So it's kind of like a fiberglass. It's not fiberglass, but it's a kind of like a putty, but it dries on hard and allows us to reshape that front of that keel. And then we have to sand it down. So this is when I'm going to walk to the front of the boat and show you some holes. So there are holes that go through the bottom of the boat. Here's 3 holes here. In a second, you'll be able to see that. The one with all the white around it that we've had to redo, that's where the depth sounder goes in. You see someone pointing there, talking about how many sand around it. And then there's one right next to it. You see another hole, and then the lighting is going to change a lot, so you might not be able to see it. It might be a quick glimpse, but there's another hole on the other side. Yep, there it is. You saw it just for a brief second. But those are for the speedos. So those holes go all the way up through the bottom of the boat. We keep plugs in them while the boat's in harbor, and then when we go sailing, we pull the plugs out, water shoots up, and we shove in speedometers, little things that have little spinners on them that as the water moves across it, they spin, show you how fast we're going. So that reads data back. The reason why we have 2 is because when the boat's going, it heels or turns over to one side or the other. So one will be engaging, the other one will be kind of not out of the water, but not having water flow across it evenly. So it won't give you an accurate reading. So there's 2 depending on the tilt of the boat. It'll do that. And then showing the keel again here. I'm getting ready to sand the bottom, so just kind of walking over what needs to be done with the bottom of the boat here. Get a good look at that torpedo down there. Call it torpedo as a bulb. Like I said, that's made out of lead. Keeps the boat from tipping over. And also when you're going upwind or even downwind, it gives you something called riding momentum. So with that much weight, once you get it going, inertia, this is simple physics, it takes a lot longer for that to slow down. So you get something called riding momentum where the bulb's moving forward, and even if the wind dies down, you continue to keep on moving forward because it takes a long time to slow down that much weight. So now I'm plugging in an electric sander, coming over here to an outlet, got to plug that thing in and then go over and start to sand away. A lot of what painting the bottom is not so much painting as it is sanding, and more sanding. So I'm going to cut to a bunch of scenes of me just sanding away. Probably did about an hour, maybe 2 hours worth of sanding. I'm only going to show you about 10 minutes of it because if you just had me on here sanding for hours, and here I'm actually sanding, you can't see because of the camera, you can't see my hands, but you'll see, yep, there it is. So what I'm doing now is I'm smoothing out these edges. The leading edge, which that's the front edge of the keel, is going to have the most dents and different things that need to be redone on it. If we hit anything, even something like a crab pot. So a crab pot is a big steel cage or metal cage at the bottom of the water, which holds crabs. They catch them, and then there's a rope going to the top to a buoy, so the crabber can come by and grab the buoy and pull the crab pot up. Occasionally, our keel will catch one of those lines, and when it does, if you could imagine, like sawing back and forth with a rope as we're trying to get it off, it actually cuts into the metal of the keel and gouges it. So later in the video, I'll actually show you some of those gouges on there. So what we redo is really focus on that leading edge because it's really important the water hits that perfectly and it's nice smooth split of the water to not add extra friction. Every little bit helps when you're racing a sailboat. But yeah, so lots and lots of sanding. Start with electric sander, power tools, and then, like you said, switch over to hand like I am now. I sanded with electric sander for probably about 15-20 minutes. I showed you a quick blip because it's kind of boring just watching me sand. So here's me just sanding away. I can see the compound just flake right off as you go across it. And it's meant to do that. So it's meant to be able to shape and mold and just gets really messy. But then once we get that shape in there, we'll paint over it and then sand down the paint and get the paint smooth. So right now, just taking out all of those little, because it's gunked on there, really focusing on leading edge and getting any of those imperfections off so you can move fast through the water. It's a lot of work. I've redone, I don't know, probably about 30 different boat bottoms. I've redone this bottom, I think 5 times on this particular boat. So done it quite a bit of times, pretty much know what I'm doing. And this is where I'm going to show you that gouge. So I'm talking to him about the crab pots, and I'll pan my camera down here in a second, and you'll actually be able to see the notch. Right. Let's see, I'll point it out. Yep, right there. You see that notch? That's from a crab pot from the rope digging into it. And basically, I was pointing out to the other guy, we need more compound because it wasn't filled in enough. So sand what we can, and then fill back in, sand again. Same thing with painting. Paint, sand, paint, sand. It's kind of an ongoing process. It takes a few weeks and a lot of man hours to redo a bottom. Luckily, they pay us in beer, so yeah, well, that's how we get paid. And there's a good shot of those holes again. So I have to sand up there as well. Like I said, I can stand underneath this. So I had to reach up, and my arm gets really tired really fast if you're just holding your arm up there trying to sand. So I walk over here, and there's a bunch of blocks over here. So I'm just going to grab a block, one of these wooden blocks, so I can throw it down there and have kind of a step stool. So I don't have to reach up as high. That's what I'm doing here, is just going over and throwing down a block. So I can stand on that and really start sanding away at that one. And like I said, that's where the depth sounder will be. So that's where depth finder. So it'll tell us how much water we have. Very important thing, especially when you draw 10 feet. I can't remember what the average depth is in the Chesapeake Bay where we race, but I think it's something like 4 feet. So you really have to watch. It's a really shallow bay. I mean, obviously in the channels in the middle, it's deep, but there's a lot of on the sides. You have to be really careful. Here, Ty, one of our other crew members, he's kind of buffing out so rather than using sandpaper, he just has kind of like a pad like kind of a scrubbing pad. So really, really lower grit than any sandpaper would be, and more just buffing out that the paint. So once we're at this stage, we're really just trying to get that gloss look over, and of course, had to have a beer in my hand while sanding. If you're doing some workout, it's always that beer tastes so much better. So, like I said, I wasn't going to spend too much time talking about the bottom. I could, it was an hour video that I cut down to 10 minutes because who wants to watch me sand for an hour straight? But I'll give you one last shot of the boat as I walk away and show you. There I'm showing the gouge mark again. But so hopefully you just learned something about the bottom of the boats. It's something that we don't usually talk about in sailing, and unless you work on boats, you don't get to see this side of a boat. Unless you dive on a boat or you work on them when they get pulled out of the water. Yes, your first time going out of this, you have a gigantic boat above you. It's kind of a little bit eerie. Standing there with his little stilts, these little metal stilts holding this boat up. But you get used to it. Been underneath so many boats. I've never seen one of these boats fall over. I say that I've seen boats falling over. I've never seen one fall over live in person. After a storm, of course, sometimes these things do fail. They're not, super, super strong. You can tell it's just a small little metal pole, but there's a bunch of them on there. And we do have to move them. That's another thing that's cool about those stilts is the stands is, you unscrew them, take one down, move it a little bit so we can paint where, of course, it was holding it. So we have, doing patches. When I first walked up, you might have saw that white patch where there was no paint on it. Well, that's where we haven't gone back and painted. And that was where the stand was beforehand. So, feel free to leave any questions, comments down below. If you race sailboats or work on boats, anything you want to talk about as well, and about, working on the bottom of boats. I want to just do something different. People wanted to know, what other things go into boats. So it's not just racing and having fun. Boats demand constant care and attention. A good race boat will always need work being done on it, and having a good crew, to come out and help out is always a good thing. A lot of times crews don't want to help with this process and they want to just hire someone to do it, but that gets really expensive. And sailing in general is an expensive hobby/sport. I think I've mentioned before, like our sails cost tens of thousands of dollars. A program like this costs, a couple $10,000 a year just to run. So having cheap beer labor, beer and pizza is usually a necessity for a lot of programs. So give you guys one final shot of the boat, and until next time, peace.